I don't know, man. I just feel like I was too harsh on this camera when I did the preview in New York, but video specs were a little underwhelming, and I was sick, and I was tired, and I missed you.
I'm sorry, what? We have to get going, man. We're gonna be late for the shoot. We gotta go meet Rene. I wasn't even paying attention. What was that?
I hate you.
I heard that. All right, so we're back with Rene helping us shoot out here. We're gonna get him off of an SLR into a mirrorless. It's the last thing we do. But we appreciate you have helping us out here, and we have Brooke Crowdis here to help us out. Lovely model. Thank you so much for doing this last minute, Brooke. So we're gonna do some studio light stuff first, I guess, Rene, just kind of test this camera.
Yeah, we're gonna give it a shot. Like my main thing is studio portraiture and outdoor portraiture, right?
For studio lighting, this camera does shoot 250 of the second flash sync. The eye detect, I think you're gonna find really nice because you can compose freely and just trust the camera. You gotta trust. You get rid of those trust issues.
Trust issues.
No more single point, recompose. You have trust issues. Okay, so we have Brooke here under studio lighting. This should really showcase the resolution capabilities of the A7R IV, but also test the autofocus performance in a lower light situation like this. Now, you'll notice Brooke is wearing a full winter parka indoors. No, that is not how Canadians just go about their day.
That's Canadian lingerie is what that is.
Okay, I guess that is how some people go about their day. So she's probably boiling to death right now, so we are gonna take her outside as well, and we'll do some natural light portraits too.
It's having a hard time with her hood, the fur of the hood covering her eye a little bit. It's not really having a...
I know from the shooting experience, it feels nerve-wracking because it's jumping back and forth.
It does.
But it's really just picking the best option available. So we found a stunning outdoor location, i.e. Rene's backyard, and we're just doing some shots here. We actually finally got some sun breaking out. Of course, this also gives us an opportunity to shoot wider apertures, faster shutter speeds handheld without the aid of studio lights.
I was having a little bit of trouble with the eye detect in high contrast situations. So in that particular shot, I had the sun and her hand was covering her eye. So it wasn't able to do the eye detect in that scenario. It did switch to the
face detect.
Face detect.
Right,
which is probably still pretty accurate.
It still goes for face. Her focus should still be...
Still should be pretty good. It was just an interesting experiment in that it wasn't able to do its
thing, depending... does your
eye detect.
Does your Canon SLR do face detect?
It doesn't do any of those things.
Does it do eye detect?
No.
Does it,
no, it doesn't.
Keep you warm at night?
It doesn't do any of those things. So it was doing a pretty good job tracking her, and the blackout was very little.
Right? Right? So the A7R IV at 60 megapixels will push 10 frames per second if you're okay with your RAW files having a little bit of compression. They go down to 12-bit, you don't quite get the same dynamic range.
Right,
but you get the speed.
I think for a sports scenario, for instance, that's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
If you want full bit rate, you can go 6 frames per second, which is not bad. And I would say 30 shots at 6 frames per second, on the buffer, RAW plus JPEG around there before you have to wait and stop.
Right.
So not bad for a camera pushing such big files.
A little bit limiting, but I mean...
Yeah. Would I use this for sports and action? Not all the time.
No.
But in a pinch for this kind of stuff?
I mean, for most of what I do, it would do very well.
Like wedding shooter or something like that? No problem.
All kinds of good stuff there, for sure. Okay, so we had one where the strobe didn't fire. I had my pocket wizard turned off. It was I wasn't ready to go or anything. So cranking this all the way up to 5 stops above exposure.
And we get a picture. Yeah.
And there's a picture there as a usable photo. Yeah. If that was the shot that you needed for whatever reason, it's there. When you first introduced me to the EVF, I was like, I don't think it's going to work out. But it did. I liked it, right?
Yeah, you get used to it.
You get used to it really, really quickly. It's intuitive. It makes sense. When you're looking at it, you can see exactly what you shot right in the moment. Yeah. It's just fine, right? The only complaint that I've ever had about these cameras, for the most part, is the feel. The bodies are just... they're small.
Sure, right? and to remind viewers at home that maybe haven't seen the other video, I mean, you're coming from like a Canon 1D platform. They've beefed up the weather sealing on this camera. The grip is actually physically larger, so I think they're starting to hear that that might be something that pros want.
Yeah.
But I get it, and you know, there are cameras like the Panasonic S1 series, which are very similar capabilities with larger bodies, which actually you probably really like handling-wise, but they don't have the autofocusing chops to keep up.
Right, that's the other thing.
And you know, other companies like Nikon are doing a really good job, Canon with their R series, but again, they tend to be going to more of this smaller size. Yeah.
If Sony had a full-size body with an integrated grip on it, I would switch today.
Wow. Okay, so we're all done. Thank you guys so much for helping us out today. Super cold outside.
Wicked cold outside.
Nice to be back.
Canada, man.
It's, yeah, she's the smart one. She's
right?
Yeah, she's got the winter gear. So thank you so much. And Brooke, thank you for coming here last minute and helping us out.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Don't forget to check out Brooke's cosmetology page and her Instagram page. It's up there on the screen. But yeah, thank you for your hard work today. And Rene, thanks so much for helping us out with the shoot.
Always
we appreciate your ancient SLR opinions. Right? You're always a good sport about it. So thanks so much, guys. Get out. You can go.
This is my place.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I guess.
You can go.
Okay. I will go. Okay. Oh, God, it's cold. Ooh, I'm going to go wide. I do also think this would be an awesome landscape camera, but it's freezing cold in the middle of winter. I give you this industrial paradise instead. And what I really want to do here is actually just demonstrate one of the features of this as a landscape camera. When it comes to resolution, 60 megapixels per single shot is no slouch. But of course, we do have a multi-shot mode here. This camera does now stitch up to 16 frames together. That is really nice. You can quadruple your megapixel count to 240. However, Sony does have no motion control capability whatsoever. It can't handle moving subjects, does a poor job there. And on top of that, you have to stitch everything together outside of the camera on your computer in post. It is by far the weakest implementation of this system, but if you've got a tripod, if you've got stability and absolutely no movement, this does have the ability to punch above its weight when it comes to resolution. Okay, so we've decided to escape the freezing cold and come inside. Plus, it's like 5 o'clock, it gets pitch black outside. That's the Arctic. It's gonna be that way for 6 months. Yay. So what we thought we'd do if we're gonna be inside and it's gonna be low light, let's do a low light test on the Sony a7R IV. Now, the common theory has always been this: the more megapixels you have, the kind of worse your low light performance. But in fact, the Sony a7R IV does many things well, and low light is one of them. You could even look at comparable sensors like the Panasonic S1R, and I would say that the a7R IV has an edge at high ISO, even though it has quite a bit more megapixels in its sensor. So you can absolutely shoot this camera like you always would. If you need more light sensitivity, raise your ISO to 3200, raise your ISO to 6400. It'll do a pretty good job. But I want to talk about another scenario that this camera can do that's quite unique. We've built a little scenario here. We've just kind of faked it with a very bright light outside. And this is very akin to trying to take a picture of somebody where you've got a bright sunny day outside, but they're in front of a window inside a dark building. And you have these two very extreme exposures. Now, traditionally, you'd have to expose for one or the other. If I expose so that Jordan looks good inside the building, first off, I do have to raise my ISO in this scenario quite high to make that work, but then the outside is gonna blow out. Now, the other option is I could normally expose for the highlight areas, make the outside look good, but then what happens to my subject in low light is they become incredibly dark. And if I was to try to boost that in post afterwards, traditionally, I would lose tons of detail, I would get gross noise, and it would just look horrible. See, the Sony a7R IV can instead just raise the exposure after the fact in post and get basically the same amount of noise as if I shot at a high ISO in the first place. The advantage is I keep the nice exposure in the background, he looks great in the foreground, and I'm not getting any more noise than I would have if I just shot 6400 in the first place, okay? Now, the disadvantage is I am gonna get a lot of what look like very underexposed photos. You just have to trust in the fact that the a7R IV will let you boost those afterwards with no real sacrifice.
Hey everyone, it's Jordan to talk about video from the a7R IV, and you can check out our a7R IV preview, which I shot while we were in New York. Get a good look at some of the camera's capabilities, all the specs and things like that. What's really interesting is we now have the resolution results from the DPReview lab, and what I was afraid we'd see, we do actually see here, and that is that the crop mode does get you a noticeably more detailed image. The problem is the Super 35, as they like to call it, crop mode on this camera, 1.6 crop when you're shooting 24, 1.8 crop when you're shooting at 30 frames per second. So you need to be very aware of that limitation. Choose your lenses accordingly. It is a shame we're not getting a sharper full frame recording, but it's pretty amazing that they're giving us the quality they have off a 60 megapixel chip. So don't buy it as a primary video camera, but in a pinch, not a bad option.
The beautiful thing about the a7R IV is it can handle many different things, okay? I think it would be awesome for commercial work and landscape work, absolutely. But certainly you could use this for wedding and event photography in a very strong way. Wildlife photography and sports photography, although those aren't this camera's strength, the camera does have excellent focus capability, animal eye detect features, and honestly, you look at another camera like the D850 from Nikon, for example, which was an awesome camera that, again, did many different things very, very well. You could argue that that resolution was unnecessary for wildlife, and yet a lot of people rocked it as a very successful wildlife camera, and I think the a7R IV could as well. So in the end, what's really going to divide you or really determine if this camera is for you is, do you need that resolution? Is the price point going to work for you? And really, is the camera going to handle well? Is it going to be something you're comfortable using? I mean, that was really one of Rene's only criticisms. Now for me personally, of course, I do like the smaller form factor and I like the larger grip. I think that's actually going to be very popular with a lot of people who complained about the small grips before. It seems like Sony is listening in some ways. You know, being able to change the color of your autofocusing point from that very hard to see gray, that's a great step forward. I love the big AF on button on the back of the camera. The joystick on the back is also really good. And overall, I find personally the buttons and dials for the most part are very well thought out, but it is not perfect. I mean, the menus, yes, they are complicated. I know everybody complains about that ad nauseum, and I actually don't think that's a downside. This camera is a professional camera. It lets you set it up exactly the way you want, but it absolutely takes a lot of time invested in learning this camera and getting it set up the way you like. But why don't we have still a smaller size RAW file? 60 megapixels is huge, and we really need alternatives. That would really win over a lot of event and wedding shooters. You know, things like the back dial now being raised, I like the position, but it feels very, very mushy. The touch implementation is still weak. I don't know why we have different locking controls for the exposure compensation and the mode dial. That seems strange that you have two different styles that are reverses from each other. So is this the greatest full frame camera in its price point? From a technological standpoint, I would have to say yes. I do feel it gives more versatility and capability, both in autofocus performance and resolution, than the Nikon Z7 and the Panasonic S1R. And it is able to handle many different kinds of photography. I would even go further and say that honestly, a camera like this with the resolution that it can pump out does compete against medium format cameras. And that is, again, very important to appreciate, especially given the price point compared to those medium format cameras. But is it the right camera for you? Not necessarily. I mean, keep in mind that if you don't need this resolution and you don't want to spend this money, let's wait and see what happens. An a7 IV, a Nikon Z9 or whatever, a Canon EOS R Mark II, they might make some very versatile packages with more reasonable resolution that fits a better price point and still gives you a lot of versatility. So leave comments below. I know you will. Don't forget, please subscribe. Check out Instagram, check out Twitter, let us know what you think. Go to DPReview.com and you can see a lot more information on this camera and a lot of sample galleries. Thanks so much for joining us.